New York Times reporter who covers the DOJ and law enforcement, Devlin Barrett. He's also the author of the new book, The Department of Revenge, How Trump Took Control of American Justice. MS Now senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig is here with us, too, and James Sample is still with me at the table. Devlin, I'll start with you. So how is the Justice Department under Trump flexing its muscle over these elections? And to what extent do you see all of this as precedent breaking?
Well, it's an extremely new course for the Justice Department. For decades, the Justice Department internally and externally had preached caution and restraint during elections and in the run-up to elections. What you're seeing now in California and in other parts of the federal government is the Justice Department openly challenging the legitimacy and reliability of elections. And I think that is a huge departure from both Justice Department policy and regulation. And I think it's a sign of where this debate is going to go and what the Trump administration is going to do during the midterm elections.
Carol, I want you to break down your brand new reporting about what's unfolding right now in Ohio. As I read it, some of the statements that you heard from people who have been approached by these agents, they seem genuinely chilling.
That's right. I mean, what's really surprising about what's happening here is that FBI agents are doing something they do not normally do. First off, they are appearing to investigate people by showing up at their doorstep or at their homes, according to our sources. They don't have warrants, and so they're just seeking answers to a series of questions, asking canvassers and people who volunteered for this Ohio pro-democracy group to register voters. Registering voters is a pretty honorable task, right? But now the FBI is showing up at people's homes, again, according to our sources, and pressing them for answers about what they did and whether they may have engaged in some wrongdoing. This is very chilling to those individuals. In fact, the Democratic Party chairwoman gave us a statement this morning after we reported this last night, saying that this has got to stop. The board member of the Ohio group, called the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, said these were straight up intimidation tactics, an effort to sow distrust about voting integrity, but also to frighten people that are engaged in seeking to broaden the people who are able to go to the polls legally and appropriately by registering them.
James, we just had an entire conversation about how Trump is right now losing on many fronts, at least in the cultural sphere and with this whole debacle over the Kennedy Center. But in some ways, do you think he's still a couple steps ahead in these other spheres?
I do. I think that what we may perceive as losing ends up being a net win for him. So take a couple examples. You nominate Bill Pulte to be the DNI, an individual who has zero, and I mean 0.0 experience in the area. You end up getting Jay Clayton. To put Jay Clayton in terms of that particular position in perspective, and he looks like he might sail to confirmation. How does he get the job? Well, on June 8th, that was Monday, he says the following to CNBC. The state of election integrity in America is, quote, terrible, and the public is right to question it. He describes California's voting system as an, quote, opportunity for fraud. That's how he gets the job. So what you now have is a convergence. You have a convergence of the new director of national intelligence auditioning for the job by repeating baseless fraud claims. He is essentially getting the job precisely because of election denialism. On another front, we say, well, the anti-weaponization fund is dead. Maybe it's dead. I'm not sure it is dead. They refuse so far.
Even if it's dead, they have the Federal Tort Claims Act, no?
Well, they have, that's right, the retail version as opposed to the wholesale version.
Yeah.
And what President Trump has is the audit immunity, which is a settlement that comes from the same proceeding. And that is the portion that means the most to him. So he's losing. He's aiming for the moon and he's getting Everest. I don't know if that's losing.
Devlin, does it surprise you that it seems like after what James just sort of set the scene for, with this switcheroo with Clayton, that there are some Democrats who seem open-minded about it, as though if we get to the confirmation, I ask you some questions, you answer those questions in ways that I like I'm going to be able to move forward with Clayton. even given the sort of clear things he's telegraphed in recent days, and also the clear ways in which we know this president sees himself at times at war with the very agencies the DNI would be leading, and the intentions he may have there ahead of the midterm elections?
Sure. I mean, look, I think a lot of Democrats look at Jay Clayton and think he's a far better option than Bill Pulte, and so they'll take Jay Clayton simply by comparison. But I also think the pick really shows how the president thinks about the DNI. You know, that is an intelligence oversight job, and the president really cares about the DNI as much as it can echo his claims of voter fraud. And you saw that before Jay Clayton and Bill Pulte ever entered this conversation. You saw that when Tulsi Gabbard was the DNI and went to an FBI search in Atlanta. And I think what all of this shows is the degree to which the president and his administration is going to use the DNI to make arguments that election results are unreliable when they don't like the results.
Carol, for some of our viewers who are at home right now, wondering how nervous they should be ahead of these elections, I think that they understand the extent to which the president and many of his allies have worked to undermine people's faith in elections across the board, even just in your own sort of cultural sense of how elections are run. Evidence can be completely damned. But now, given what we know these figures may actually try to do with the machinery of the federal government behind them, is it actually going to end up being Democratic, and I mean that both maybe as a capital D, but also lower D, sort of Democratic voters in this country, people who care about the fabric of our democracy right now? Are they going to be the ones on the side of questioning and wondering about tampering, about interference? I mean, in a sense, is there going to end up being a role reversal because of what's been telegraphed about what's to come here?
That's a really great question. I mean, one of the things Donald Trump has always been so good about, ever since I started covering him 10 plus years ago, is his mastery of the megaphone. He keeps repeating that there could be fraud here, or there's likely fraud, or these are California is the most rigged election ever because he didn't like the results or he wants to raise questions about it. He's very effective at getting his supporters and his base to believe something for which there is no evidence. On the other side, on the reverse side, there are going to be concerns because imagine that there's an election result that maybe people think is curious or surprising. I've been surprised many times by an election result, and I've never thought to myself, oh, I guess there was fraud. It's just been a surprise that it went that way, that there was so much support for this person and not for the other. Imagine if you're a Democrat watching this administration's machinery turn out and crank out for this purpose. You're going to wonder, was it because there was a chilling effect? Was it because brown voters were afraid to go to the polls and meet ICE agents? Was it because somebody frightened someone away from voting?
James, you have something you wanted to add to that.
Just that Carol's point is absolutely spot on, and it's worth remembering. We're only 5 days removed from Donald Trump using that megaphone that Carol just referenced in the Kristen Welker interview, in which all she asked for was evidence. He's not interested in evidence. He's interested in repeating the claim so that that becomes a predicate in itself for the actions he wants to take.
Yeah, he was quite good in that interview at actually reversing who has the burden of proof there, as though it was like Kristen's job to do that, when actually, if you are going to be making completely baseless claims, you need to come with the evidence to back them up.